But I have a distorted view, you have a distorted view. But together, out of the consensus, we can find a more accurate view. I want to share with you some perspectives, but as we go, I'll be straw polling your own opinions. I want to share with you a word which I have found useful, and really I'm going to focus not so much on the Credit Suisse view, or whether you are one Credit Suisse, or 3 or 4 or 25 Credit Suisses, who knows, after January the 12th, but I really want to look at life from the point of view of your clients, which after all is what it's all about, I guess. And I want to share a word with you which I have found useful. It spells the word future, F-U-T-U-R-E, and this is all described in FutureWise, and there's a copy of FutureWise for each of you outside. The first phase of the future is fast, of course, to do with the speed of change. And the problem for Credit Suisse at the moment is that whatever part of the bank you're in, the world can change faster than you can call a meeting together. And the BlackBerry age has made this even more of a challenge. And those that can respond as fast as the world is changing, of course, will gain a huge competitive advantage. I put it as simply as that. Those that can respond ahead of the way the markets are changing will stay in business, and those that don't will be out. And the trouble is, the days of having a strategy are over. When the world is changing faster than you can even have a strategic review or form a budget, then we need to have more than one strategy. And it means that in terms of the companies that we're investing in, we need to be sure that they have more than one strategy. They have more than one game plan. Why? Because the world can change faster than they can think. Now that's a very real challenge. Now, I spend most of my time on the outer edge of this radar screen. Most boards spend most of their time at the center. I'm most interested in the wildcard risks and opportunities. These low probability but high impact risks are these events, these 1% per year possibilities. What kind of things might I be thinking about? Something that's, 1% per year. A low probability risk. So low that the Credit Suisse board or Credit Suisse First Boston board hasn't got the time to give much attention to it. But if it happened, it would affect you a lot. It's very unlikely, but it might. Any ideas about the kind of things that you might think that I'm thinking about? Another oil depot blowing up. That's right. First one, well, that doesn't really affect us too much. Second one, we start to get distribution challenges. That's true. Okay, yet another example. Tsunami, yes, a very good wild card. We could debate. Remember, wild card is, say, I said 1% risk, but actually it's interesting. When you start to go back and look at wild cards, you find them more often higher risk than you thought. For instance, tsunami. What is the risk of another tsunami happening in the next 20 years in that region? Do you know? Most experts reckon it's very high. Why? Because we only had half the big shock. And the shock that we had pushed stress, unimaginable pressure on the plates, the tectonic plates further down that line. So we're set for another tsunami, probably over the next 5, 10, 15 years. That's the general feeling. We might be wrong about that. By the way, most of the future is debating about timing rather than the event. We know it's going to happen, it's just a question of when. Let's think of another example. Wildcard event. San Francisco quaking, yes. That's interesting. But we start off by thinking wildcards, 1% risks, but when we go back and look at these risks, almost always we find they're higher than that. What's the risk of San Francisco having the big one in the next 40 years? 50%, maybe more, or certainly a very substantial one. So it could be a higher than 1% risk per year over the next 25 years. Let's think of another example. Bomb, catastrophe, yes, dirty bomb in London. Yep. We can go on. I promise you, this is a good exercise to do with your own team. Just get them 20 minutes to list out how many wildcards there are affecting your part of the bank. You'll find 500 before you've even spent 10 minutes. And if it's true that you find 500, and if it's true that their average risk is only 1%, you, of course, are guaranteeing that in an average year you will see 5 wildcards go off and disrupt parts of what you do. What that means is boards and senior teams are in for quite a rough time. And that is exactly what's been happening to your competitors and to Credit Suisse over the last 5 years. By the way, wildcards are rogue traders. They are someone hacking into your private banking lists. There are huge numbers of them once you start to look. Let me give you an example of another one, bird flu. What is the risk of bird flu mutating into a human form that can transmit rapidly? What's the risk of that happening at some time over the next 5 years? What do you think? 80%. 80%? Anybody else? 1%. Do you know what the World Health Organization reckons the risk is of bird flu mutating into a human form and spreading right the way from top to bottom through this tower block? 100%. It's only a question of when. And I think it's really quite likely that that 100% risk will happen in the next 5 years. Next question, what is the death toll of bird flu at the moment? 50%. Okay. Does anybody know what... well, let me just tell you what the US has reckoned. The US has just published its own estimates for how bird flu would transmit from one single child in Thailand on time zero. They reckon it would go from one child, a hypothetical child with bird flu, on time zero. Within the first 6 weeks, we get to 760,000 cases of bird flu in the United States alone. This is worst case scenario. Within the following 10 weeks, just 16 weeks after, we get to a total of 91 million cases, 91 million cases of bird flu in the United States alone, of which 1.8 million will die. The UK is working on a minimum estimate of 50,000 deaths from bird flu, which is 4 times the normal, but an upper estimate of 800,000 deaths from bird flu. Let's backtrack a minute. Let's not be alarmist here today, but let's just recognize that this is more than a wild card. Now, I don't know what the risk is of bird flu turning out to be as dangerous as the highest estimate. I hope and pray that it turns out to be just a bad form of flu. In other words, no more than 50,000 deaths in the UK, but it will include some in this tower block. What I want to know is this. See, the future is not about facts. It's about emotion. You're reacting emotionally as I'm talking to you about bird flu. What I want to know is this. How many deaths from bird flu will there have to be from a human-to-human version of bird flu before China closes its borders or Australia decides that no planes land anymore? What do you think? There is an actual answer, a mathematical answer to that question, because the Chinese government has already told us. Do you know what the Chinese government has said? They've said the moment that there is evidence that a humanized form of bird flu is spreading actively in China, they will close all their borders. Now, you may say, well, that just means they won't give us the evidence for a while. But my friends, how many cases do you think there will have to be coming out of China before they're under pressure to do it? I'll put it like this. How many cases do you think that have to be coming in to the United States before the United States decides to close its borders, which the US government has already discussed and said it's already a part of Fed policy. Federal government policy will be to close the borders of the United States of America if necessary. Remember, with SARS, yeah, do you want to say? One. We don't know the answer is the answer to that. But all I do know is what happened 2 years ago. With SARS, we had 8,600 cases, of which 860 died. It caused a certain amount of chaos. Who was in the Far East at that time? I was. I traveled through Hong Kong at that time. I tell you this, it knocked quite a big chunk off the economic growth of that region for a while. And it bounced back because, of course, we contained it within 16 to 20 weeks. It was more or less over. But if bird flu was to become a national or an international pandemic, you can imagine it could be quite a while before people start to behave normally again. So it stops international travel. Maybe countries don't close their borders, but actually there's quite a big loss of confidence in the market. Now, I'm just saying, here is a massive issue, potentially, that the markets are not correctly pricing right now. In fact, there's hardly been any reaction in the markets to this issue. All of you, the moment you think about it, recognize this could be one of the biggest peacetime issues we've ever had to face. That's why the UK government says this is health enemy number one. It could all be a massive overreaction. The WHO could be wrong. But what's the risk of your home burning down in the next 12 months? What do you think, statistically? I mean, you have an insurance against it. It's got, well, I hope less than that. I hope less than 1 in 50 of all the houses in London burn down in a year. You know, I hope, for your sake, it's about 1 in 25,000. But yet we have insurance against it. The trouble with the bird flu, of course, is that at the moment we don't. Now, I just made the point, as I say, that the markets are about emotion. They're not usually about rational facts. Maybe you don't believe me. But if you want to read emotion, if you want to read the future, therefore, we need to get inside the minds of how people are going to think and feel. And that's a challenge to us as bankers because we prefer the numbers. And if you want to understand bird flu and the impact, you need to think what the emotional reaction will be. You say, will parents in London still be sending their 5-year-olds to school? Question. If they don't, they won't come into Canary Wharf to work. If they don't come into Canary Wharf, what does that do? Anyway, okay. I want to show you why market research lets us down. You see, market research can't tell us the future either. Why? Because market research simply polls people's thoughts about how they'll feel in the future, but they don't know. Here's an example. This is a video that was banned on television in Britain. I thought you'd like to see it. The big question is, why was it banned? Any ideas why that was banned? I mean, what is wrong with the British sense of humour? That's what I want to know. Any ideas? Not an idea. Well, I think it probably disturbed some people, perhaps who just come back from the funerals of their mothers or their fathers with their, their children or something, or perhaps other parents were worried about girls being put off having babies. Did it really hurt like that, Mum? Yes, it did. I don't know, but actually it contains the truth as well, which is that life is short and it's accelerating. Have you noticed how Christmas came round a little bit earlier this year than last year? Put your hands up if you noticed that. Actually, it's happening every year. Have you noticed that? They take 5 or 6 days off every year, the previous year. That's what happens. It's part of the distortions of our brain, the distortion of time and space. So we don't believe market research. We try to get close to our customers and then we imagine how they're going to behave, but they don't know, so we have to take a guess. And that means building a scenario. One of the areas that can change very rapidly is, of course, trust. And I would argue that Credit Suisse has only one product that you sell, and that is trust. Trust is the basis of everything that you are. The trouble is it's a very cruel world because it takes 25 years to build and 25 hours to lose. And that's a challenge. And I'm going to come back to the compliance question, which is highly complex. Because you might think that just by complying, you create trust or you maintain it. But the answer is you don't. I'll show you why. But I'll give you an example of how quickly trust can be lost. Well, of course, your imagination knows that all too well. It's retail funds. Is anybody involved here in retail funds in any way whatsoever? Just as well. I've been doing a global survey for a while now of those who sell these things and those who make them. And I last did it at Monaco with one of the biggest global fund managers conferences, and I took the opportunity to carry on my straw poll. And I asked 3 questions. I said to these hundreds of people, I said, please put your hands in the air if you have recommended one of your own retail funds, equity funds, to a member of your own family or a friend. And you're laughing. Why are you laughing? Because you know what happened. The answer is 10% put their hands up. The rest laughed at them, and then they put their hands down again. That's what happened. Actually, that's shocking to me. I'm not a banker. It's shocking to me, I have to say, but I didn't let that show. I just asked my next question. I said, put your hands in the air if you are confident that you can outperform a computer program. After all, you are the best paid people in the world. One or two put their hands up, the rest laughed, they put their hands down again. One of the women heckled me from the back. She said in a loud voice, she said, I believe in the products that we sell in equities. I said, madam, I'm very pleased for you, but just look at the sea of silence all around you. Another man put up his hand and said, he said, you know, we sell funds, retail funds, which aren't just based on equities. We sell some based on property. I said, thank God for that. You'll have something left to sell when the balloon goes out. Let me ask a third question. I said, who here has invested your own money? You've put your own money, a significant amount, in some of your own funds. Everybody puts their hands up. I said, please keep them up if you chose to put your own money in your own funds. Everyone puts their hands down. I knew what was going to happen. In fact, the previous night I've been talking to the director of the European Association of Fund Managers. And we've been talking about what a big challenge this is. And at this cocktail party, just before the conference started, a friend of hers rolled up, rather the worse for wear for drink. And he didn't know me, he knew her. He said, hello, he said, I don't know anybody that buys this rubbish, do you? He said, well, we put all our money in cash and property. And walked off. I said, I'm very sorry. You are a representative of this conference. All of you here are representatives of one of the biggest financial service sectors in the world. You are a group of some of the best paid people in the world. What you're telling me, I said, I'm not here to tell you the future funds. You have just told me. Let me show you what you've told me. You've told me that you believe these funds are a rip-off, that you rarely beat the market. In fact, I haven't got the figures here, but the Financial Times did a survey and found that only 8 out of 40 funds had actually outperformed the index, looking at an average over 20 years. Only 8. So you know that most of these funds are a complete rip-off. They're sold to idiots, people who should know better, but we try not to tell them the truth. We just sell it to them anyway. So what you're telling us is these things are grossly oversold, to utter fools, and we make money all the way down, suck out vast amounts of money out of the system, and sell products which are crap. I expected to be eaten at the end of that over the coffee break, but I wasn't. People came up to me one after the other, shook me vigorously by the hand and said, thank God someone has had the guts to say the truth. And straight away doors opened to go and talk to boards and senior teams of other organizations about this issue. Why? I don't know why. What I'm saying is it's obvious that you can get locked up to what I would call institutional blindness, right? Why should it take someone like me? I'm a medic, for heaven's sake. Why should it take someone like me to come in and talk to a whole load of fund managers and say something that's stark-ravingly loony obvious, which everyone has known deep down inside for half a decade, and suddenly the whole industry starts to fall down like a pack of cards? So that's a big challenge for us. Fast urban. Urban is to do with demographics and the fact that if we don't sort out the contrast between the wealthy and the poor, we will end up with a major challenge in terms of instability. And it's happening inside some countries and it's happening between them, and Credit Suisse could be a target, as HSBC was. 3 of HSBC's HQs were blown out just 3 or 4 weeks after I talked to them about this particular issue. It's a major challenge. And of course, we can benefit from the top of the pyramid, from the this enormous growth of the wealthy people, and we'll make very good business out of it. But life is getting very complicated for investors, understanding some of these demographic shifts and how they should manage their business. India, stable. China, possibly unstable. China's had 70,000 protests in the last 12 months alone. One of the last ones that happened on Friday, 20 villagers were shot dead, according to reports that haven't yet been verified. But China is on the edge of a huge information revolution, which is tough if you're a dictatorship and you don't like freedom of expression. China is also being pulled in both directions by this massive growth of wealth, which you are helping to manage, at the same time as rural poverty. So we've got a powder keg here. Now, just returning to the UK and the US and Europe and things like that, you know, of course, that 75% of US and UK wealth is owned by those over the age of 65, And you know from the statistics that 2/3 of them are women. The logic, therefore, is that women, older women, own most of America and most of the UK. I don't know why we bother to sell any products to anyone under the age of 50. There aren't any of them, and they're broke. We're also dying out. In Germany, the population, the number of kids per household has now fallen so low that in Germany you will need 8 great-grandparents to produce a single great-grandchild. What that means is the population of Germany is set to fall from 82 million down to about 10 to 15 million people only, unless something changes. Only 2 things can. Wait, I mean, it's simple maths. When you only produce 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 children per couple, that's what happens. And only 2 things can change. One is that people start to make babies again, which has happened in France. Now the French government are paying people more to make babies. Or you get immigration, and that's the only challenge. It's one or the other. There aren't any other solutions to this mathematical problem. But if you're thinking about pulling 50 or 60 million immigrants into Germany, they're not going to come from Russia because Russia's becoming extinct. Czech Republic is the same. Slovakia is going the same way. Scotland is dying out fast. The Swedes in Stockholm, in some parts of Stockholm, the average age for a woman to have her first child is now 38. So it's not going to come from Stockholm, and so on and so on. I want to ask a question, which perhaps is one of the most important questions of all, which is, do we believe the aging forecasts? This is extremely important for all of you who are investing in companies of any kind. I just want to show you some science that's been happening recently. You may know some of this, but this has all happened really in the last 3 years. In London hospitals now, doctors are taking bone marrow cells from people's hips and putting them into the heart. And this is producing heart repair very effectively. Others are beginning to repair the brains of animals who've had stroke using their own cells. A friend of mine is repairing the eyes, the retinas of people with of animals with damage, and is hoping to cure macular degeneration using your own cells to rebuild your own eye tissue. There are 2 teams of scientists in the United States that are interested in non-aging animals. I don't know if you know this, but turtles, sturgeonfish, and these particular kinds of humpback whales do not get old in the normal way. The clock goes tick, but it doesn't go tock. At least not as fast as in you. Scientists are looking at the differences between this one group of whales that dies in 20 years and the other group that dies in 200. And we know that they die in up to 200 years. Why? Because one of them, for instance, died recently. The vets arrived to dissect the corpse on the beach, and they cut it open, and they were very interested in a scar on the back of this whale. They dug deep into the scar, and they found a lump of stone. The stone had been shaped by human beings. They couldn't really recognize the markings on the stone, so they got an expert. The experts dated it as a harpoon head, which had been made in around 1825 to 1830. It came from a Spanish whaling ship. So this animal was already adult in 1925. Astonishing. Now, if we can find the genetic difference between these 2 types of whale, and if we discover, as we suspect, that it's the same trick inside the sturgeon and the turtle, then we could find perhaps the proteins that these genes actually make and use them as a medicine or activate the genes inside your own body. Now, we are right on the edge of a huge explosion of understanding and knowledge about aging. But here is an interesting question. What is your life expectancy anyway? Sorry, what's your name? Adrian. Adrian. How old are you, Adrian? 35. And what city were you born in, or place? London. Londoner. 35 years old. So straight away, I know that you have 50 years more of life expectancy on average, right? But you know, because you work in this building, and because you work for Credit Suisse, I can add 5 years on. Did you know that? Right? Put your hands up if you knew that. Okay, you may think it's the other way around, but it's not. You see, Adrian is in the top socio-demographic slice of the UK, all right, because of his job, because of your background. And that automatically gives you a higher life expectancy. Why? Because we have to balance the people who live in Hackney and Bow, who come off council estates, who had very poor backgrounds, many of whom will be dead by their 75th birthday. And in order to maintain the average, we have to add years to you. So, my friend, you've got average life expectancy of, you're 35 now, that's 55, so we're giving you 55 more years. Now, remember that's average 55 more years. So for every one of your colleagues or friends of the same age who dies at the age of 75, we're going to add even more years onto you. So what it means is you've got a very strong chance of actually surviving well beyond your 90th birthday. Remember that in the US there are already 76,000 people over the age of 100. And in fact, we know that will rise to over 150,000 people over the next 5 years. So Adrian, you'll be in very good company. But let's just wind the clock back, because you won't be there in 5 years. You'll be there in 65 years. Here's the question to your friends. I want you to tell Adrian how many extra years, at the speed at which we're developing all these new things like stem cells and aging solutions, how many more years do you think that scientists could give Adrian in the next 45 years? Remember, in 45 years, he'll still have a whole decade to go on average to play before his body goes. So how much do you think we could give him in the next 45 years? By the year 2050. Put your hands up if you think, you're pretty confident, in fact more than confident, you think it's almost a cert we would be able to give him an extra 5 years. Put your hands up now. Okay, put your hands up if you think, no, we wouldn't. It's a biological impossibility. Okay? Put your hands up if you think, oh, well, more than 5 years, in my view. More than 5 years, maybe 10 years. Put your hands up. Okay. What you're saying is, the majority of you are saying something very important. What you're saying is the actuarial forecasts that this company uses to calculate your pension are rubbish. One. Two, you are prophesying, you are predicting the insolvency of the balance sheets of most corporations in the UK and America on the basis of a number. Because you know that GM is already massively on the point of, obliteration. What happens if we add 5 years to the average life expectancy of everyone who's working for GM under the age of 40? I tell you, it's the end of GM's balance sheet. It's a huge issue. There's a conspiracy at the moment. Governments don't like to tell the truth because it's politically very, very sensitive. Did you know that, despite that, did you know that the Japanese government every 12 months is tearing up the life expectancy for all women in Japan? Every 4 years they do it, and they add 12 months more. So this is crazy. You can't go on adding a year of life expectancy every 4 years to someone who's only 35 years old. You need to get your maths right. You shouldn't be revising your forecast. You get your maths right, you take a view, and you stick by that view for a good decade. Don't go fiddling every 4 years. The reason they're being forced to do it is because each time they're being forced to tell a little bit more of the truth. So we have a conspiracy of silence, really, when the governments are not interested in actually saying what you know, and nor are those who calculate the actuarial forecasts for pension plans inside companies. But you know the truth now. But if you start applying that truth to your investments, it has quite profound results. Fast, urban, tribal. I'm going to skip through these other phases. Tribalism is the most powerful force in the world today. It's more powerful than atomic bombs or the entire military might of the United States, China, Russia, and the rest. Tribalism is when one group says we are us and you are them. The extreme outer edge of tribalism is, of course, terrorism. And tribalism is the most powerful positive force as well. It's the basis of all family, team, belonging, community. Mergers work or they don't work on the basis of tribalism. And one of your great challenges over the next couple of months will be to try and work out how tribes actually function together. You could say that the success or failure of all mergers depends on understanding tribalism. And almost of the most effective leadership is tribal. Every customer relationship is a tribal relationship. Every successful corporation builds tribes and takes care of them. All of branding is about tribes. The future of the European Union, well, it will be, of course, a challenge between tribalism on the one hand, saying we're all different, and universalism, saying we're all one. I don't know the outcome of this challenge. All I know is that it will produce a lot of conflict and tension. Fast, urban, tribal. The opposite of tribal is universal, globalisation, and all the rest. And yes, we can talk about the 1 million jobs that have moved from the America, Canada, Japan, Australia, and the European Union to India and China. But actually the real issue, as far as I'm concerned, is intellectual capital rather than just cost. In the UK, we produced only 6,000 IT graduates last year. India produced 840,000 of them. That, for me, is a much more impressive statistic than the fact that the Indian labour is less costly than the British. Inside that statistic is our future. It's the future Credit Suisse. Why? Because every one of these people is a new middle class. Every one of these people is aspiring to life insurance policies, funds, a whole range of stuff, pension plans, a whole load of other things which eventually will drive Credit Suisse First Boston's business into a new wave. What about clients, though, in a fast, globalized world? Well, it's a challenge. The BlackBerry age is a challenge, and it's only just begun. We are only in the first 5 minutes of the digital age, but it's already causing stresses and strains. It's one of the reasons why the only banks that will survive are one banks. However, we manage that process. But it's a bank where private clients, for instance, can access data at the speed of light all the way across the whole organization. Where a large corporation, a large institution has one conversation with one person who's the doorway to everything in that complex relationship. Everything inside his head is understood by you, or by you, or by you. But you three of you are in different time zones. But you're working totally together as a totally seamless support package right around the world at the speed of light. And the trouble is, daylight is the big challenge for the global village. We can stitch everyone together, but you know this problem here, which is that we're video conferencing today to 4 sites. Thank God they're all in Europe. I have to video conference from my home. I have video conferencing in my house. Why? Because invariably I either have to get up at 7 in the morning to video conference or I stay up at midnight, which means I want it actually in my own home because of the daylight issue, the daylight challenge. But for you as primary customer supporters in very complex relationships, increasingly my clients are saying that they actually want a lawyer, one of the world's greatest lawyers on, let's say, online banking issues. They want them on the line. They want someone from San Francisco who's just done a massive deal in China recently, creating a new online bank as a cooperative with a state bank. They want an expert on Chinese law and culture. They want 2 people, one from Shanghai, one from Beijing, in on the conversation. And they also need their own boss from Geneva and the chairman of the organization who happens to be traveling in Joburg. And the trouble is, it's Sunday morning, so only some of them will be there, but the fact is they want it. Why? Because a member of the Chinese administration has agreed to have dinner with them at lunchtime. And it's a Sunday morning Chinese time, and they only just heard the call about an hour ago. And they want to be able to go into that meeting with a full brief, absolutely armed up to the eyeballs with everything that they need. And the banks that will succeed are the same as the legal companies which will succeed. It's exactly the same. It's complex, multidimensional, in-depth professional support and advice that goes right across every boundary you can imagine, both business boundaries and geographical, cultural boundaries, to provide an absolutely up-to-the-minute advice which is appropriate to the client. And that has a big impact in terms of personal life, pressure, organization, free flow, the breakdown of these business units, these silos, and all the rest of it. It's a very big challenge. How we actually manage these client expectations in a BlackBerry world. This is part of my answer to it. This is actually in my own home. This is a 7-way video conference for the World Bank, in fact. It was in the height of the SARS epidemic. No one could travel. Fast, urban, tribal, universal, radical. By the way, these tools, of course, cost us absolutely nothing now, but most of us aren't using them. Who's using Google Desktop? It's a fantastic innovation. It will save you at least an hour or 2 a day. Who here has got more than 1,000 emails in your inbox or pending or something else at the moment? I have. I know what they are and I know where they are. Who's got more than 10,000 in your sent box? I have. Yeah. Well, Google Desktop Search will go bloom, boom, bang, and find everything that you want on your hard disk, wherever it is. As fast as searching the whole of the internet, it will search your hard disk. That's a little irony, isn't it? You can search the whole world faster than you can search your own equipment. but Google sorts that out. There are tools, there are software tools, technology tools, which are nothing to do with your CIO or your own technology department, which your own technology department will probably hate, because it's actually all part of, there are security issues, loss of control issues, that actually can improve your productivity dramatically. Another example is putting video conferencing systems in your own home, or totally enabling yourselves with technologies that may or may not be officially approved, but somehow you've just got to have them, because it's your life, folks. Who here is traveling more than 20, 30, 40, 50 flights in a year? Not very many of you, okay. But in other parts of the bank it would be loads, and the travel load is growing exponentially. Fast, urban, tribal, universal, radical. Radical is about single-issue activism and the death of politics. And the reason why this is very important is because single issues generate regulations, and regulations affect compliance, and compliance can change your life. So the big question is what's coming next. And by the way, the future, again, is not about technology, it's not even about law, it's not about scandal, it's about emotion. This is an emotional issue. It's driven by human emotion and passion. Every single issue tends to become a regulation, as I say. And Spitzer is an interesting example of the third millennium. And we're going to see lots more Spitzers. Who is he, for heaven's sake? He's only a mayor's lawyer in the New York's office. And yet every time he sends out an email and picks up his phone, he creates a shiver that goes down the back of the boards of companies around the world. And I've seen that with some of my biggest clients in Europe. The Spitzer sent off an email on Monday to a client in the United States, and they're already evaluating their practices all the way across the board here. How? He has no jurisdiction. He has no right to ask those questions legally. That's irrelevant. In a third millennium world, remember, the future is not about technology. It's not even about jurisdiction. It's about emotion, and emotion is enough to make the change. By the way, compliance is dead. Who here is involved in compliance? Legal departments? Compliance is dead. It's over. It's finished. Why? It's the absolute minimum, but it will keep you out of prison. It will do that. It'll also keep him out of prison. What's your name?
Simon.
Simon will be kept out of prison by your great efforts, and he will be grateful for that. But it won't protect Simon from losing his job. It won't protect Credit Suisse First Boston. Why do I say that? Bribery used to be a clever game, and in fact in some countries it still is. In some parts of Europe you used to be able to claim bribes against tax. So the more you bribe, the more the government paid you. But the problem is this. You see, suppose we have a CNN interview up here, and this is a CNN studio interview, and here's your CEO, but it could be you tomorrow, in the future, on the board of some corporation or other. And by the way, it could be a different bank altogether. But it's the Credit Suisse emails which are coming back. And that's what they've got in front of them. Here. And it's the Credit Suisse emails which actually you signed off in 2005. And I'll tell you, the more senior I talk to, the quieter the room gets at this point. Because most people know that they're compromised by emails from the past, which were totally compliant, but have left them very, very exposed now in the media. This is how the story goes. So I'm talking to Tom Jones. He's our board member, but he used to work for this bank or some other bank. I says, Tom, you don't deny these emails are yours, right? Tom says, of course, I've never denied it. These emails, of course, they are mine. So you don't deny that you authorized 1.7, was it 1.7 million? No, sorry, 700,000. Was that to the Nigerian government? That was also the Nigerian government. But there are 6 emails here, a total of $2.7 million, in order that you be able to set up a banking operation in Nigeria. Is that correct? That is correct. And I'd like to point out that of the $2.7 million, 1.3 million was paid for by the German government. Look, Tom, we're not disputing the fact that everything you did was completely clean and clear and above the law. We understand that you complied perfectly with every regulation. We've looked at it all. You were absolutely clear. We're not saying that you're a criminal. I just want to ask you a question, Tom. Are you in favor of these new laws? Or do you think we should go back to the good old days? You know, the ones where you could do this kind of thing. Yes or no? Tom dithers. He says, well, it's not for me to make the laws. It's not for a bank to make the laws of this country. It is for the people of this country to elect a government. The government decides the laws, and then we comply with the laws. No, Tom, I'm sorry about that. I'm not going to let you get away with this. I just need to know, are you in favor? Would you like to see the same laws as you now have in the European Union in Nigeria, for example? Well, I think the times have changed. I think in general, on balance, I think I would be in favor of, I think it's appropriate that the regulatory environment has been tightened up. I see. So what you're saying is that it was not right what you did then. Well, I wouldn't say that. What we did was right at the time. Oh, I see. So you just have no ethical code whatsoever, Tom. You just make up your ethics as you go along, according to what the rules are of the country. He's lost his job. He's lost his reputation, and he's trashed the bank. He won't go to prison. Thank you. I made the point. So that's why compliance is dead. It's an absolute minimum, but it won't protect your future. And that's why legal departments, and I can tell you I've worked, I've advised people like Linklaters and Freshfields and others. These big companies know that the days of just giving compliance advice is finished. It's history. We're having to provide ethical advice now on where the mood will be. It's emotion again. Where the public mood will be. How people will think and feel in the light of some other scandal which is almost inevitably going to happen. So you're taking a fix on a future scandal, how that's likely to change the operating environment. What's your name? And how Matt's career is likely to be affected by that in the year 2012. So where do we go? Well, the answer is to protect Matt's future, we need to go much further than compliance. We're going to have to build an ethical framework which is robust, which we believe in, things that we can say, this is the rock on which I stand. I stand on this. These are values on which I am proud to have built a business. These values have governed every decision I have made inside this bank and every other job that I ever did. These are the values in which I believe my grandchildren will still be building their services and their businesses. That's a very different place. Actually, that is a value set which I believe will protect you for the future. Now, you might say, yeah, Patrick, it's all very well, but it's rather naive. If we did that, we'd go out of business. But I tell you this, there are other banks that are already doing this, and you're doing it too. So we have to keep close to people's feelings. Here's an example of an interesting ad. Here's another one that also could have enraged the animal activists. I have to point out that this ad was made without harming this particular cat. No. Okay, this was made in Canary Wharf. Did you know that? This is actually made here. The story is that the company put this pitch up to Ford, and they rolled around. They were croaking with laughter. They were wetting themselves. They were laughing so hard, and then eventually the chairman's head hits the ground. He says, "Don't ever let that out," he said. And then he winked, and the rest is history. Because what happened was it became an official, official, deniable campaign. And the video, I don't know what the truth of that is, but I do know the video was made here within about half a mile of here. And I do know that they put it up on a website and alerted one or two people, and I do know that 250 million people have seen it. So I'm not going to spend long on this particular issue except to flag it up. It is probably the most important environmental issue that there is. I just want to say something, again, about the science. Whatever you think about the science, I do actually believe the science about global warming. But whatever you think about it is irrelevant. The question is, does the rest of the community start to believe this? Yes, they do. If they do, what is the emotional energy which will be attached to this issue? Huge. And by the way, planting trees can't deal with it. If you've got 40 million old carbon and you've burnt it into carbon dioxide, you can plant a tree, my friend, and it will suck out a little bit of carbon for the 80 years and a lot of carbon for 20 years. And then the tree dies. And for the next 30 years, every molecule of that carbon gets released back into the air again. So the only way that we can deal with this problem is by taking this carbon and sucking it out of the air and putting it back under the ground where it came from. And that is why all technologies to do, and industries to do, and companies to do with carbon sequestration are in for a very, very, very big future. You will see carbon sequestration talked about absolutely massively over the next 25 years. Fast, urban, tribal, universal, radical. How on earth do we live in this crazy world? The answer is we need ethics and values. And we've been talking about that all the way through. What about the future? These are UK figures, but in fact they seem to be borne out by most other countries as well. With this I finish. I'm very close to the end now. 90% of 30 to 40-year-olds want to leave conventional business jobs. Put your hands up if you're in that age group. Put your hands up. 90% of your peers want out of business. They just want out. At 60% of 25 to 35-year-olds feel unfulfilled. 83% of them are having a quarter-life crisis. In fact, my son is 23 years old. He is already in his first 6 weeks of his first job, and already he's wanted to downsize and get a life. Now, he's part of a generation. Gone are the days when you just attract people in with share options and extra bonuses. It's over. That game is over. Why? Because the largest... by the way, 60% of this age group say they see no point whatsoever of getting out of bed in the morning to get money for Credit Suisse. They couldn't care less. They could not care less about bottom line profit or shareholder value. They think it's all a waste of time. And this disconnection with human passion is a big challenge. Because to win the war for talent, we have to connect people and make them think that the challenge is actually worthwhile. They need to stay with us, work with us. I look at this trend of getting a life. This is a new trend. In the olden days, people came to London Business School to do MBAs to join the board. They don't now. They come to get a life, be successful, have choices, have fun, get a great job, be stretched like crazy, earn lots of money, but also to have some balance, to break out of slavery, to be your own master. Who here has had a significant conversation about work-life balance or life-life balance in the last 2 years? By the way, work-life balance, what's the opposite of life? Work-life?
Death. Work.
Death, work, death. Work-life balance, opposite of life, death, work equals, well, what does it recall? Actually, that shouldn't be such a great surprise when you looked at this thing. Of course, people are talking about work-life balance. But actually, we want to be talking about life-life balance, right? When they're talking about life-life balance, then we'll know we're making a dent in this issue of passion. So work-life balance is very, very important. Much, much more important than it was a decade ago. Who here has seen a Credit Suisse ad for a job in Canary Wharf that is offering, as part of a strapline, come to ask for a better work-life balance? Put your hands up if you've seen that in writing. It has to be there. My friends, why? Because the world has moved on. You know that this is now number 1 or number 2 career priority for anyone who wants to work for Credit Suisse. Almost everyone. And those that don't get it will leave. Put your hands up if you've seen a good member of your team leave to go and downsize and get a life. Put your hands up. Right? That's what's happening. They come, they cycle around, they churn, and they go. And they leave with all their intellectual capital and their client relationships inside their heads and all the rest. So this is absolutely vital for us to understand. So it means things like, for instance, if we're going to have a conversation with, what's your name? Mark. If we're going to have a conversation with Mark about the possibility of you going to Hong Kong, I need to know, is Mark married, or does he have a girlfriend? Does he have any kids? What age are they? Are there 2 careers in the house or only one? What are their current plans about their future? Are they happy in their current secondary school? If he went to Hong Kong, would his wife actually go, or would she just walk out? Or if she did go, would the kids go? My parents went to America. They didn't ask me. I was 15 years old at the time. My brother was 13 years old at the time. You know what? We voted with our feet. We said, hi, you're off. We're staying here. Well, my dad didn't ask me first. And I said, I'm not going to school in the US. I'm not going to boarding school. I'm staying at home. Bye. See, these things are actually important. The guys should have asked my mum and my dad about us before they shifted us over, or tried to. It wouldn't have made any difference, but they would have looked less stupid. So we need to treat people as whole people. That's what it's about, especially in the 3rd millennium. Here's another challenge. Volunteering. It's very interesting. 6 out of 10 Americans do it. The average gift of US time is 200 hours a year. In the UK, it's even higher. It's as a percentage of the population doing it. It's high in almost every European country, and on the streets of Calcutta, and in the slums of Delhi, and in Uganda and Zimbabwe, it's about the same. So, here's a question let me ask you. It's an unfair question because you're at the busiest time of your life, so you can imagine it might be zero, okay, the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I want you to put your hands in the air if in the last 2 or 3 years you've given time to something for nothing, or to someone, wait for it, let me define it first. You shook a tin for the tsunami disaster or for the Red Cross at Christmas time. Maybe you'll help out on the Parent-Teachers Association of your local school. Maybe you help out with a little bit of financial advice just to a small charitable trust. Maybe it's just that you did the shopping last Christmas for an old lady who had fallen over and broken her hip. Maybe you help out at a local church as I do, or maybe you're part of a synagogue or a mosque, but whatever it is, you can put up your hands now. If you've given time for something, for nothing, put your hands up now. Have a look around. It'll warm your heart at Christmas time. Okay, put your hands down. The reason why you do it, of course, is for community, and in fact, it's an almost universal passion. 1 or 2 of you didn't put up your hands because it was an unfair question. See, I didn't ask about your gap year or what you'll do when you're retired. But right now, it's your wife that gives the time, you're doing the work. Or it's your husband that gives the time, you're making the money. Okay? And you outsource it by giving money away. But the fact is that almost every one of you here is connected in this in some way. This passion for community. And my friends, you will learn more about the person sitting next to you in 3 minutes by just asking them why they put their hand up. And what it is they do, and why they do what they do. Ask them the personal story, and you'll find more about each other in 3 minutes than you will in 30 years working for Credit Suisse. Because you'll touch passion. You find the truth about this person. You see, I don't believe anybody in this room gets out of bed to make shareholder value for Credit Suisse. See, I don't think I've ever met anyone in Credit Suisse, or anywhere else from that matter, who gets out of bed and says, "Oh, thank God I'm alive today, let's go and make shareholder value and bottom line profit." I don't think such people exist. If they do, please send me an email because I want to make a study. I know it doesn't apply to your senior team. How can it? What happens to the boss of a big bank if they don't make their money for 3 consecutive quarters? So please don't tell me that the CEO or chairman of a very large institution has total passion to an organization when the organization has 0 commitment towards them. It's a fantasy. So if nobody gets out of bed to make shareholder value or bottom line profit, if even your board and senior team aren't really passionate about it compared to the passions they might have for the family, the goldfish, the golf, the Red Cross, or whatever project their kid's involved in, then we need to look somewhere else for passion. So this story is over. Growth, profit, shareholder value motivate no one. Motivate absolutely no one in your organization. Please prove me wrong. Send me an email. I'll write another book. But I haven't found anyone yet. So if that's true, why do people get out of bed? Well, they get out of bed for themselves because it's exciting to make money or to have a challenge, to work in a great team, or it's just fun, or it's interesting, challenging, provoking. They get out of bed for their families, they get out of bed for their communities, they get out of bed for all kinds of reasons. But you know, it isn't just community. Put your hands in the air if you've had a passionate conversation about Iraq in the last 3 years. Put your hands up. Passionate conversation about Iraq. What? Do you have relatives in Iraq? No. Do you know anybody who lives in Iraq? No. What on earth is it your business to have a passionate conversation about this strange country? Why? The answer is it's in your genetic code to be concerned, to have views, to be engaged with this deeper wider world, to think about global warming, to be worried about carbon dioxide levels, to be concerned about a whale, if it's a whale that turns you on, or it's the people of Iraq. And these passions are deeply rooted. They are in every one of your shareholders, every one of your clients, and everyone who works for you. They're in your boss and your boss's boss. They're in every member of the Credit Suisse board. And we pay it hardly any attention at all. But if we want to be a great bank for the future, if we want to provide thought leadership, moral leadership, real global leadership in any area, we need to engage with the passions that people have. and understand our clients are interested in more, actually, than just the return. You might say, yeah, but that's the only reason they'll make the decision. That's true, but probe beneath the surface, and they're just like you. They bleed passion. There are things that they're concerned about. They want to know it's made in the right way. So, finally this. Individuals will talk about their own personal needs, their family, their friends, their community, and the world they live in. And this is the Better World speech. It's the only speech that actually works. This is the speech of a typical CEO in a large organization, and unfortunately many business managers. And might even be one or two of you here. And it goes a bit like this, and with this I'll finish. Well done everyone. We made our bottom line profit. We made our numbers for the last quarter. I know it was tough, but I'm pleased to say that our market capitalization is up. And with your help, I believe that we can actually confound the analysts and actually prove them wrong. And we will increase our market share by 1.3% in the next 3 months and 3.2%, and so it goes on. And everyone rolls over catatonic with boredom. And here's another speech. And here's the speech of political leaders, actually. Where the worst leaders on the earth, morally the worst, but the most powerful leaders in history have always led with the same speech. And it's always a better world speech. It promises a better world for more than one individual. And it goes like this. Follow me, because together I believe that we can build a better kind of tomorrow. For you, for those that you care about, for your families, for your friends, for those in the cities and streets where you live, for those in the towns and the villages of our great nation, for the whole of humanity, together I believe that we can build a better kind of tomorrow. You have to imagine 20,000 people here. And then if you're American, forgive me, but the speech then goes on. Actually, it doesn't matter what nation you're in, but the next phrase is, in God we trust. And then finally, and may God bless America or whatever the country is, and that's the end of that particular speech. But actually, you're seeing better world speeches being told all over the place. And I'll give you two examples, one in banking and one in BP, one in oil. One is BP and the other is HSBC. The HSBC chairman in February said this. When he was embarrassed about so much profit being made, he came up with the same speech. It could have been written off this sheet. It was written by the same speechwriter, perhaps, that wrote the BP chairman's speech. And it was this. It went a bit like this. I'm proud to say that we have record profits this month. I'm proud to tell you that in the corporation tax alone has financed in the UK the building of 43, I don't know what exactly it was, the building of 43 new hospitals, 55 new schools. We have funded out of our corporation tax just this year the salaries of 25,000 new nurses to work in the National Health Service, and so on, and so on, and so on. I'm also proud to tell you that out of the amount that the Chancellor has left us with, we have actually been able to pay out a record amount, and 3/4 of that money will go directly to the pensioners of this country, because they own 3/4 of the wealth of this country. And if you're BP, then you say, and because of course every pension fund has about 7% of its portfolio wealth is our shares. And we're mindful of that responsibility. We know that these shares have been earned on trust. This money has been given to us by pensioners and people like you and I who've put money aside month after month, year after year, and the hope and promise that they will actually be worth something in the future. And in our day and age when people are really worried about their pension provision, I'm pleased to tell you that one stock alone has indeed been worth investing in. And ours has increased its market capitalization, and what's more, we actually put some income into the back pockets of pensioners this Christmas. Your Christmas presents, my friend, will come from BP shares. Your mother's shares, your father's shares, your aunts and uncles' shares, and everybody else's. And your pension as well is with us. So we're proud to make profit, and I'm also proud to tell you that the quarter that wasn't pensioners' money was in fact your money for whatever it was, for the daughter's wedding, or it was to buy a new car, or it was for a new holiday, or to fund a new hip operation, or whatever it is. But I'm pleased to say that we earned it by taking care of the environment, by acting responsibly, by giving good value, by eliminating wasteful costs which would otherwise rob our pensioners of their future. And we did it, yes, by downsizing where we should do, by outsourcing when we should do. We created jobs all over the world. Our outsourcing centers alone have generated over 50,000 jobs, which are the result of the 3,000 jobs which we outsourced in India over the last 12 months. And so it goes on. And we put things back. And every job that we created in India, we knew that we needed to provide health care for the husband, for the wife, for the children, for the aunt, for the grandmother. We invested into schools around those call centers. We built clean water. And so it goes on, and so it goes on. I paraphrase, but actually go back and read the speeches. The BP HSBC speeches were exactly the same. Why? Because actually, building a better world is what it's all about. It's the passion that you have. It's the only way that you engage people, and it's part of your future.